you Trekkies and TV addicts. Don't mean to this, don't mean to bring static. All you Klingons in your grandma's house. Grab your backstreet friend, they get loud.
Say, Doc, what's up in this shit? I'm a man that's on a mission, like a scientist. When I'm applying this,
Check it out. What's it all about?
Hey class, Mr. Avila is here to talk to you today about the introductory paragraph. In this first part, we're going to take a look at the thesis. So when you write an introductory paragraph, you should know that an introductory paragraph has three parts. In order that they appear, the first part of your introduction is the hook, the second part of your introduction is the link, the third part of your introduction is the thesis. But that's not necessarily the order in which you should write them. The thesis is the last sentence of your introductory paragraph, but it should be the first thing you think about, should be the first thing you write. How do you start? Well, I would give you some advice. I'd say brainstorm. Start to think about the question you were given by your teacher, or start to think about what it is that you want to write about. And once you have an idea of what you want to write about, make sure you go and do some research. What happens a lot of times is you'll pick a thesis, you'll start writing, go to do some research later, and realize that there's not enough out there for you to write about, so you wasted all this time. So I tell you, before you get started, think about what you want to write about, and then go make sure that you can find enough information. The other thing we need to know is that a thesis is only one sentence. And this sentence should not start with, "In this paper I will prove." That's not good writing. Besides being one sentence, your thesis also has to be an opinion. For instance, NASA is responsible for America's space program. That's not an opinion. You want to be able to write a paper on that. If you said something like the government should increase NASA's budget, now you have an opinion that you can defend and write about. So what else must a thesis be? It must directly answer the question asked of you if your teacher gives you something to write about. For instance, if I were to ask you, as you prepare for college, what do you believe the life of a typical college student is like? You might come up with a thesis like, the life of the typical college student is characterized by time spent studying, attending class, and socializing with peers. That's not a bad thesis. Your thesis also must be specific enough or broad enough to meet your page requirements. Let's look at a broad thesis. If I use the thesis, environmental factors are the prime reason civilizations fall, I could write not a paper, I could write a book, I could write multiple books about that. I'm talking about every environmental factor of every civilization that has ever fallen. That is way too big, unless your goal is to write a book. So let's narrow it down a little bit. Environmental factors are the prime reason the Mayan civilization fell. Now instead of writing multiple books, you're writing a book. And maybe that's still too broad for you, right? Let's look at something more specific. Drought and deforestation are the prime reasons the Mayan civilization fell. Now you're talking. This would be a good maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 page paper. But maybe you need a 2 to 3 page paper. You could say something like, Mayans themselves contributed to the downfall of their empire through deforestation. Now you have a very specific topic. So don't be afraid to go back and modify your thesis or to rethink about your thesis so it fits the page requirements. Chances are, if you've been assigned a 4-page paper and you can come up with 2.5 pages, your problem is that your thesis is not specific enough or it's too broad, right? Go back and change that up. Let's take a look at some other thesis examples. A thesis could be, high school graduates should be required to take a year off to pursue community service projects before entering college in order to increase their maturity and global awareness. Okay. Without a doubt, the internet is the greatest invention in human history. Okay, that's a good thesis. A year of mandatory military service should be required in the United States. Henry David Thoreau is the most important American Americans have never heard of. Poe heightens the suspense in his short stories by appealing to all 5 senses. Or here's another maybe more specific version of that. Poe does use the theme of eyes and loss of sight in both The Pit and the Pendulum and The Telltale Heart, but for different artistic reasons. So, you might even say something like, Facebook is the worst thing that ever happened to America, which is a thesis that we're going to be using for the other parts of this as our example. So that kind of wraps it up. Nice and short, gives you an idea of what your thesis should be about. Feel free to go to part 2 to learn about how to write a hook, or jump to part 3 to learn to write about a link. And you can also see a finished example there, as well as some other hints and tips that I've learned along the way that might be useful to you guys as you write your introductory paragraph. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. See you later.